Hey, it's Grady at Twin Creek Audio, and today I want to go over two methods that help simplify hybrid mixing, especially when it comes to recalling a mix to make a change for a client or for yourself if you're working on your own project and you decide, hey, I don't like that. So the first and easiest way to simplify hybrid mixing is to get most of your mix in the box and then just send those individual tracks out through a mixer or a summing mixer or something of that nature for the last step when you're actually combining the tracks. But you're doing all of your processing in the box. There are two parts to this demonstration. First, I've created an in-the-box mix using Reaper plugins and some Analog Obsession ones, soft tube tape, and the Tape Machine 440 from IK Multimedia. So first, let's check out the in-the-box mix, and then I'll show you what those same tracks sound like when I sum them through an analog console. So now I'm going to take the in-the-box mix that I did, and I'm just going to send each of those individual either tracks or pairs of tracks out through the Mackie 8-bus console. So I'm basically using the console as a summing mixer. I'm not going to use the EQ, no high-pass filters, faders are all set to 0. We're just going to pass the audio individually through the console and let it be combined here in the analog domain, and of course print the output of the console back into the audio interface for our final summing mix. I'm not using the big console for this because it's set up for the next demonstration. Next, I have a slightly more complicated way to do this, where you have a lot of buses and subgroups with your analog hardware, and you leave those set the same way all the time, and then you can push different things into those signal chains when you're summing through the console. The same with reverbs. You might have 2 or 3 different types of reverbs that you can put on individual elements or several elements at the same time. You might have 2 or 3 reverbs, and you set those up, leave those the same way all the time. Then when you run your tracks through your console, you just send things you want to those buses to add some of that analog compression or saturation or whatever it is you're looking for. Here's an example of this more complex method of hybrid mixing, but still simpler to recall. In this demonstration, I've set up 3 analog compressors on 3 pairs of subgroups, and then I set up a pair of transformers on another subgroup. Then I'm going to send all my tracks through the console, and I can send anything that I want to pick up those compression characteristics or that transformer saturation over to those buses, and I can add that into the mix. I'm not actually processing on the individual channels on the console. I'm just sending those signal sources through the console after they've already been manipulated somewhat in the box, and then I'm adding compression and saturation using the subgroups on my console, and then of course using the aux sends for a couple of reverbs. I have a bunch of compressors connected to subgroups on the console. On my console, I have these small faders, kind of like an SSL, where I can actually use these as another set of sends, and so I can send some of my main channels out to subgroups. So I have 4 pairs of subgroups, that's 8 channels total, with 3 compressors on the first 3 subgroups and a set of transformers on the 4th set of subgroups. So I can push the different signals from my mix down here into those different subgroups to get the different tone and saturation and compression from those items on the submaster subgroups. So I'm summing through the console, but in this case I'm actually mixing. I have everything set to 0 in the console, and so I'm getting my final balance, and I'm able to send things to different types of compression and that transformer saturation using the subgroups. You can do the same thing on something like a Mackie 8 bus or a Soundtrax Topaz. It's not quite as flexible because I have the ability to vary the level that I'm sending to the subgroup. You can always adjust the outboard gear you're using to get that balance a little better if you like. I also have a couple of reverbs down here on blue faders. So I've got a couple of stereo reverbs, one of which is actually a separate audio interface and a Surface Pro tablet, and I'm running the Arturia Rev Plate 140 on that. So I'm using another DAW. Well, actually I'm using just a very bare bones VST host to run that plugin. So I'm using that as if it was an external reverb.
Touchscreen reverb control. Awesome.
I'll put a link in the video description to the video where I've used a laptop or whatever I had laying around as an external reverb that I can connect to an aux send on the console. And then here I have my Yamaha Rev 500. So the way this works is I've sent a bunch of outputs from my audio interfaces. I have 24 outputs on mine that are connected to channels on the console here. And so they're coming down here to the monitor faders. But my console has these small faders, and kind of like the SSL 4000, these can be used as an extra send to pairs of subgroups. So that's what I'm doing here. So I've got all my main tracks that are coming from the DAW and the audio interface outputs coming up here on the main channels. Then these small faders allow me to push all of these sounds into different compressors and outboard gear that I have over there. So I have different sets of subgroups that are assigned here, like the kick and the snare. The toms I have assigned to a couple of different compressors and a pair of transformers. Some of the other guitars and keyboards and things are sent to more mild compression, but also being sent to the transformers. This console has floating subgroups, which is also kind of like the SSL. And I've got these 8 faders down here are my subgroups. Hopefully we can see those. This pair is a DBX 1066, which is kind of my tight compression for drums and percussive things. Then this pair is the LA Audio 4x4 compressor. The LA Audio 4x4 compressor. I don't know if you can see me on both cameras. So these two are optical and VCA compressor, the ART TCS twin compressor. And then these two are a pair of color modules. They're louder than liftoff royal blue color modules, like Neve line amps with really nice big transformers. So we've got all of these different subgroups that I can send different signals through. So basically in this way I can send different amounts of different parts of the mix over to my subgroups, which have compressors or transformers on them. And I can also assign those here to these mute groups, so I can turn off those different subgroups. They can be turned on and off. Some things are being sent to some subgroups and not others. And I'm not using any console EQ or anything on the console. Any EQ or anything like that I've already done in the box, but I am setting levels here on the console, and I'm using my small faders to send to buses. So I'm going to start out without the VCA compressor and just kind of switch some things on and off over here with these mute groups so you can kind of hear what these are doing. Hopefully you can hear the differences when I mute and unmute these subgroups with the different compressors and transformers on them. I'll use these two methods in some cases. Other times I use my DAW just like it's a tape machine, and I use the console and the outboard gear just as if I was using a tape machine, where I'll have compressors on the inserts of the console and EQ on the console and everything else. It is more difficult to recall that, so these other two methods are ways that you can adopt to make doing recalls on the mix faster, since the bulk of the mix and the really minute adjustments and those kind of things are already saved in the project in the box, and you're just adding either the console saturation in the case of the first example, or you're adding different saturation using subgroups or accents on your console. Those are just a couple of my ideas of ways to simplify hybrid analog mixing using consoles and outboard gear. If you know of other methods, please leave a comment below. Also, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the Twin Creek Audio YouTube channel if you have not done so already. I appreciate everyone out there that watches my videos. I hope everyone has an excellent day, night, evening, weekend, weekday, hour, minute, second, nanosecond, whatever it is you're having. Have a good one. Thanks for watching.